I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about body work and which modalities you need to bring into your fertility journey. And this is really all about how do you move from the sympathetic fight or flight into the parasympathetic rest and digest, or as I've just discovered, feed or breed. So it's exciting to learn about some of these modalities. A lot of them you've already heard about, but it's like, how do you select the one that feels right for you that can bring you out of that feeling of chronic stress, feeling overwhelmed, feeling burnt out. And these can help you get a glimpse of helping your body be safe as it prepares for pregnancy success. So excited for you to listen. Let's go. Hey, Dr. Berlin, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me and also for this amazing resource that you provide.
Awesome. Great. So today, if you could share with us really how you came to do this work.
I always wanted to be in healthcare from the time I was 7. I walked into a building in New York City where I grew up, and they were teaching a CPR class. And I was very confused. I'm like, what are they doing to that poor woman with no arms and no legs? And when it was explained to me that you could use your body to sort of be somebody else's heart and lungs for a little while until they can get advanced medical care and you can save their life that way. Just put this seed in my head that I want to do something like that. I want to use my life, my resources, what I have to help other people. And in a medical way. So I started taking CPR and first aid and responding to emergencies and lifeguarding. And when I was 17, emergency medical training. And when I was 18, I started working in hospitals and emergency rooms and ambulances. And 19, I started my pre-med studies in college. And then that year, my father died suddenly from partially from a medical mix-up. And so I sort of wanted to get on the more holistic side of healthcare. I still wanted to do healthcare, but I wanted to not be in the drugs and surgery space. As much as I love them and respect them, I wanted to be on the more natural side. So I didn't know what that meant. After I finished college, I just took a year to study some of the alternatives, and I fell in love with this combination of chiropractic and massage together. Like they really make a great combination for various reasons, but one of them is that you don't really have a muscular system that's totally separate from a skeletal system. You have like a deeply intertwined musculoskeletal system, and working on it from both sides is more powerful than one side or the other. But also not just for pain, where people think about chiropractic and massage for achiness and pain and stiffness. There's a lot more to it. In the chiropractic side, the spine is supposed to protect the central nervous system, the brainstem and the spinal cord. And when it's not able to do that and there's irritation to the central nervous system, the entire body suffers because the brain and spinal cord control the function of every cell and organ in the body. And if they're not able to get good information coming in about what's happening in the rest of the body, the peripheral nervous system, or to be able to send appropriate care, then the body's doctor within that diagnoses and treats problems is at a loss. There's an impedance to its work. And so using chiropractic massage for those purposes can really have a major impact on other functions and organs of the body. So I went to school for both, and at the same time I had met my wife, and she was going to psychology school. And when we were both just about done with grad school, we thought, let's have a baby. And unfortunately, it was not that easy. We followed the instructions, and no baby came out. And then we kept trying, and we found ourselves on this roller coaster of fertility. And we really went through a lot of different medical fertility diagnoses and tests and treatments. And we tried a lot, and we did not find success in that path. And we were still pretty young in our 20s. And the doctors were like, we don't know why, but we don't think this is how you're going to have kids. Like, we recommend that you consider adoption or alternative pathways to parenthood, which we're not necessarily opposed to, but we also were young and broke, and the journey itself, the fertility ups and downs, really broke us even more, not just financially, but our relationship was struggling. Our own personal, physical, mental, and spiritual health was on the decline. And we just thought this is not a great time to become anyone's parent. So we took some time off from that and we started to work and earn money that we didn't just give away to fertility treatments. And we started to really work on our relationship and go on these really long, beautiful bike rides together. And we started to meditate and improve our nutrition, Chinese medicine and yoga. And we got to a much better place, a much healthier place. It's around the time we moved to Los Angeles as well. And once we were settled into Los Angeles, we thought, okay, let's look at, alternative pathways to parenthood. At which point we found out we were pregnant. And then every 2 years, another baby popped out. It's like we couldn't turn it on when we wanted to, and then we couldn't turn it off. And now, thankfully, we have 4 healthy children. And what we realized when we opened our mind-body practice together, my wife being the psychologist and me working on muscles and bones, we wanted to work on overall health the same way we improved our own health. But we always had a little eye on how can you naturally boost whatever fertility you have. And we kind of had a side program for that. And the first year, I would say maybe a couple of babies came through that program. And then every year after that, it just snowballed. There were babies everywhere. And the pregnancy work sort of came from there. Our patients were like, well, I still want to work with you now that I'm pregnant. And I didn't know that much about pregnancy. And so I would try to refer them out, but they were persistent. And so I studied everything I could about pregnancy. I felt confident that I was not going to harm anyone. And I started working in pregnancy almost 20 years ago. And it's just grown ever since, both in terms of practice. We do a lot of prenatal work, birth work, postpartum work. But we're still always at our roots doing some fertility work. It's just more in the background now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Many times people that do come to this line of work have got a personal story. So thank you for sharing that. So let's kind of talk about the how chiropractic care or body work can really help with the reproductive organs, and really why would we consider this as being, because many times on the fertility journey, you will get a diagnosis and you'll either get it from your OBGYN or you'll be referred out to the REI, and then they put you down a path of IVF, and then no one's kind of looked out to see, what are those different stressors on the body. And then many people, will ask their OBGYN or their REI, hey, does nutrition matter or do supplements matter? And it's just asking the wrong person because they're not trained in that stuff. So it's really important to have a team around you, but really you at the center, because we know our body best. So bringing in this side of the thing, if we weren't, I see a chiropractor regularly because here I am hunched over my computer like this, and I'm super tall, 6 foot. I got to keep get the posture going. And I find it really helpful for me. But for years I was like, oh, chiropractic, that sounds like horrible. They're going to crack my neck and I'll be paralyzed. All those different stories like from 100 years ago that you hear. So why body work? Why someone on the fertility journey? Why is that important?
Interestingly enough, you said the reproductive organs, but I would zone out first and look at the reproductive organism, which is the whole human. And the difference between the drugs and surgery care, allopathic healthcare, and all of the complementary forms of medicine, which tend to be holistic healthcare, is the whole part. We don't look at a specific tiny little part of the body and see what that's doing. Allopathic medicine has really specialized over the years. I remember, in my mind, I can almost picture a time when you needed the doctor. You would reach out to them and they would come over on their horse and have a little black bag. That in that little black bag, there was probably like a handful of things, maybe a thermometer, some aspirin that they had early on, and some alcohol. And the thermometer was sort of going to tell you whether you're going to live or die. And the aspirin and the alcohol would keep you comfortable until it happened. And things have changed a lot. Now we go to them. There's all sorts of diagnostic. There's all sorts of therapeutics that we can't bring to you. And the specialization started happening as we learned more and more about the body. We started to focus each doctor on a very particular area. So, like, you would have an orthopedist, and you would have a cardiologist, and you had a nephrologist. But the orthopedist, the bone doctor, is subspecialized. There's orthopedists that only work on the upper part of the body or the lower part, or even more specialized, just an arm or a hand. There is a very well-known thumb specialist in our area. So the idea of holistic is completely opposite to what allopathic medicine has become. They start to focus more and more localized on specific areas, and there's a very big benefit and value to having that type of expertise available to us. It's just the idea, I think, why they call it complementary medicine is because what complements that really well is a different pair of eyes looking holistically at the whole organism. And the idea of holistic medicine can somewhat be kind of understood from the concept of when you step on a dog's tail, it barks. So if your symptom is the barking and all you're looking at as a specialist is the vocal cords, why are these vocal cords making so much noise? You could remedy the barking by anesthetizing the vocal cords, but there's still a foot on the tail. You have not addressed the ultimate problem. So it's good. It's good to have somebody look at the vocal cords and good to look out, zoom out and look at the whole organism. When it comes to fertility, there's so many different things that can be going on. I think you said something extremely wise is it's really important to inform yourself and to learn what options are, to learn what sort of diagnoses there are, what kind of treatments there are, both on the holistic side and on the medical side. And only that way can you be in the driver's seat when decisions have to be made. You can have valuable input into your own care. It's really hard to get all of that data from any one practitioner. So if we're looking at as a person as a reproductive organism, one place that I would look at globally is the nervous system, and in particular, the autonomic nervous system. So a lot of different ways you could break down the nervous system. One is the central nervous system, like the brain and spinal cord, which versus the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that are kind of outside of that, or the enteric nervous system, the ones that have to do with digestion. But another way is by function. You have the voluntary nervous system versus the autonomic nervous system. And the voluntary system is the part of your nervous system that you think about and control consciously. If I want to raise my arm, if I want to walk, smile, talk, dance, those are all things that I can control by thinking about them. The autonomic nervous system is kind of like it sounds, automatic. It responds to stimuli automatically, stimuli around you, stimuli within you. An example is if you're in an area that becomes hot, your body will take the actions necessary to make you sweat and cool you down. And if you're cold, it has equal but opposite actions. And the autonomic nervous system itself has sort of an operating spectrum, where in one end is the very, very calm, safe end of the spectrum, and on the other end is the very, very kind of intense, in danger end of the spectrum, commonly referred to as the fight or flight mode of nervous system operation, where the danger is, and the feed and breed mode, where the relaxation is. And the autonomic nervous system kind of controls very specific organs. Your eyes, or whether they're dilating or constricting, letting in more light or less light, where blood flows to, where nerve flows to. Your heart, how fast it's beating, how deep it's beating. Your breathing, how fast you're breathing, how the depth of your breath. Your liver buildup, or storing sugar or breaking down sugar. These are all controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and the actions that they're going to take on all these organs are sort of predictable when the stimuli that they're reacting to are either more calming or more emergent. So if you're laying outside in the most beautiful weather and you're drinking your favorite calming drink and reading a wonderful book, your operating system is probably all the way down on the feed and breathe side, the relaxation mode. And in that, they call it feed and breathe because it takes your digestion and your reproduction, and it's concerned about those things. That's where the focus is. That's where the effort is, and also general maintenance of the body.
Yeah,
But then,
I've never heard it called feed and breed. I've heard it rest and digest, but feed and breed is actually perfect.
yeah, yeah, similar, right? Feed and breathe, rest and digest. And so, if you're in that setting, and then all of a sudden you kind of hear a rustling noise in the trees, and you look up, and there's a mountain lion chasing after you, you do not need to consciously think about your response. It is automatic. Everything that happens is automatic. All of a sudden, your feed and breathe is in the background. Your body is working your heart is pumping very fast and very deep, and you're breaking down sugar and making it accessible to all the muscles and circulating it very quickly to all the muscles with that fast heartbeat, and your breathing changes. Your pupils dilate so you can see the battlefield very, very clearly. You become hypersensitive so that if you're touched any place, you're immediately aware and can immediately react. Blood flow moves out of your postural muscles, like your head, neck, shoulders, back. You don't need those for the emergency, and into your arms and legs so you can run or fight for your life, fight or flight. And that's the extreme. And then when that's over, it's supposed to kind of go back down towards rest and digest or feed and breathe, the parasympathetic mode of operation of the autonomic nervous system. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there are stressors, again, maybe within us or around us, that are indicating to our central nervous system, to our autonomic nervous system, that there is danger. And so maybe not to that same scale, because it's a spectrum, but maybe more than we should be on a regular basis, we're having the stimulation like we're in danger. And when that happens, when you're running from a baby, your body, I do a lot of birth work in the hospital all the time. If the power goes out in the hospital, the red outlets still work. And the critical things are plugged into red outlets. They're on generator power. The regular outlets don't work. When you're running from a tiger, having a baby and having a donut are not red outlet activities. They're not necessary for survival. Your body doesn't care about them. At best, it's not going to help. Even more so, it might get in the way, because having those things while you're in this emergency state could be detrimental to your survival. So you have, if that's happening to you on a regular basis, you're just always a little more fight or flight than you should be. You've set up a holistic situation where your body is very actively not trying to get pregnant or trying to block you from getting pregnant or staying pregnant. Again, this is one of many, many different things that could happen that might naturally decrease fertility, that can be reversed by signaling to your nervous system that you are not in danger. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But some of the symptoms you might see from someone who's generally in more of a fight or flight mode, where that thermostat is set a little more to emergency than it should be on a regular basis, could be headaches, because your pupils are always more dilated than they should be, always letting in more light, overstimulation, so that even just a little more stimulation gives you perhaps a migraine headache. The neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, you're always flushing some of that fluid, that blood, with all the nutrients away from the postural muscles and into your arms and legs. And as a chiropractor, I rarely see people come in with, chronic arm and leg stiffness and pain. It's always neck, shoulders, back, and hips. The muscles you don't need during the emergency. And you might have fatigue, adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, where you're just constantly breaking down your glucose stores and depleting yourself. So low energy and difficulty sleeping, or even if you do get a good night's sleep, not having energy in the morning, and weird digestion also, like irritable bowel type symptoms. where again, your body's not really focused on digest or feed because it's always on the lookout, level orange uh, threat alert from threats that are not there, at least externally. So you can see how if you can reset that nervous system, move that thermostat to more of a parasympathetic mode of operation, how you might feel better in general, but how also your body will, stop trying to sabotage pregnancy and will be more poised to accommodate or even facilitate conception and healthy pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you're saying, yeah, for the fight or flight piece where, yeah, the arms and the legs, those are typically fine, but it's the neck, back, and shoulders. Like for years, I had the worst neck pain. It'd be like a ball just right there. That's why I started going to the chiropractor to help with that. And it was like a car accident I had when I was 18, and it just seemed to like every time I was stressed, I could feel all the stress going to the neck piece. And yeah, so we're working with couples that have, typically gone through, multiple failed IVFs. They've been told donor eggs are their only option. And there's the stress in that journey of getting a diagnosis of, low anti-Müllerian hormone, high FSH, and really, the stress of that diagnosis, even kind of thinking there's no hope. And then the stress of life in itself, because typically, again, we're working with like type A busy professionals who have put everything into their career and their life, and now they're throwing everything into the fertility journey. I was diagnosed with POI at 28, had both my kids with donor eggs, and then years later discovered all these food sensitivities and gut infections, and for me, chronic stress. And at the time, I actually wouldn't even have said I was stressed, like so disconnected. Of course I was stressed. I just had a lot of energy and thought I could do all kinds of things. And then the body said, no more. And I still will find myself trying to push and keep going when it's like, you can still keep going, but how do you do it in a way that it's not like you're always racing in this impatience piece? And so basically our whole program is, mind, body, spirit, about helping people get out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic, using different tools and looking at that. So this conversation is super impactful because it just helps people then to realize, as we're always saying, if you're in survival mode, your body wants to, if you're in, if your body's under attack, it's in survival mode, not, and your reproductive health is deprioritized.
Sure. And today's day and age, it's hard not to be in survival mode. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much stress from so many areas. And I think, like you said, like just getting a diagnosis, or almost worse, not having a diagnosis, and something that you can't control, and something that you were told as a teenager that if you're not careful, this will happen, even if you don't want it to happen. Now you do want it to happen, and it's not happening. That stress alone pushes the sympathetic nervous system. We have clients that we work on regularly who are either just starting that journey, and so only doing holistic things to try to help. But we also have clients that are on IVF, on the IVF journey, and it's almost like the important adjunct of doing things to calm your central nervous system so you can get the benefit of the drugs and surgical approach without creating more downside.
Yeah, to me, there's no negative side effects to working on your health. Like you either get pregnant naturally. If you do go to IVF, you improve the chances of it working. So it's like sometimes we want to like push it with drugs, but what's the repercussions to your health, to your children, and postpartum and more. So obviously, I had both my kids with donor eggs, but then years later, my health took a complete nosedive. So what are some things we can do to support the nervous system and kind of get us out of that? Well, first of all, to recognize that we're even in the fight or flight. We might not even know that we're dealing. I think a lot of us know that we're stressed, right? But if you're feeling that overwhelm, maybe you're in that burnout. I've done many episodes on burnout. How do
Well, I think
you?
that any of those symptoms that I talk about, especially if you have more than one, and as incrementally you go up, the odds are that you're just in overdrive on that fight or flight mode. is that fatigue, how you can get a good 7 hours or more of sleep and still wake up fairly tired. Digestive unreliability. You eat stuff and sometimes you're constipated and sometimes you're kind of slick and or in between, you're not sure how your body's going to react to food, or you're very sensitive to a lot of foods. Um, Another one is the headaches. If you're getting headaches on a regular basis, that's not normal. You shouldn't have headaches on a regular basis. And if you do, and if it's like certain types of stimulation, just a little bit is enough to put you over the top for a headache. That's another sign of the same thing. And then the other types of pain that we talked about: postural pain, neck pain, jaw, very tight, clenching jaw. Um, yes.
Yeah. My jaw, literally, I remember in university, that thing was like almost sealed shut. I remember trying to eat. I'd be like, I can't open it. The TMJ just and the Chiron, she'll put this is the worst thing that she does when I go to see her. She sticks her finger and then she's like, I'm like, oh my God, that is so
Yeah.
painful. Yeah. And she got
Yeah.
the glove on.
You cry when those trigger points are released, but it's a huge release, and it's very effective. But the same thing, if you're chronic neck and shoulder pain, low back and hip pain, if have these cycles of low back pain that are acute for 2 or 3 days and then they come back 3 months later, these are all signs, that your central nervous system might be operating, the autonomic part of it might be operating in fight or flight mode more than it should be. And if it's having that effect on the things that you can feel, it's probably having similarly negative effects on your digestive and reproductive system. What to do about it is a
Yeah.
whole there's a whole host of things you can do about it. The things that we do to you about it are a little different than the things that we recommend that you do on your own. In our office, we generally combined bodywork, and my wife is a psychologist, so sometimes the reason you're in fight or flight mode is buried deep inside you in your mind. And you can't separate your mind from your body. Your mind is your body. You don't store thoughts, memories, emotions, feelings in your brain. You store them in your mind. Just like brain tissue can store them, so can any other human tissue store them. So sometimes you're holding them in organs, your digestive or reproductive organs or muscles. And so what I do is work on releasing some of that mechanically. And what my wife does is work on releasing some of that mentally. So her modalities that she'll use for things like that, in addition to regular talk therapy, are EMDR. So eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, and somatic experiencing are two big trauma processing modalities. With EMDR, it's this idea that when your eyes move around quickly, like in REM sleep, you start to have dreams that are not logical, where you can fly, or where people who would never be together in the same room are all having a conversation together in the same room. And the reason that happens are because the guardrails, the fact checkers on reality, go down a little bit. They quiet down, and things become a bit more fluid in there. And if you do that on purpose, if you use eye movements on purpose to kind of lower those guardrails and open up your mind to possibilities, then you can go into some traumatic things that have happened and sort of desensitize from them, make them so they're not consuming you. Somatic experiencing is a little different, but it's the idea, again, soma means body, the idea that you're storing some of those emotions and thoughts and experiences and trauma in your actual tissue of your body, and trying to find where you store it and releasing it so that it doesn't create dysfunction there. That's sort of the mind element of what we do. And on the body element, it's a combination of massage. And massage has so many different benefits. I mean, just increasing blood flow and lymphatic flow and releasing neurotransmitters that make you feel better, endorphins and enkephalins. But then also, kind of just like somatic experiencing, sometimes we'll get to a muscle or a tendon or an organ where you store something, you're holding on to something big, And you can feel it. You can feel the tightness in that area, the dysfunction in that area, the lack of blood flow to that area, and you can start to release it. Sometimes it does come with a big emotional release. I'll just push into a muscle and there's an unexpected big emotional release. Someone will cry. I have one myself when I was working in ambulances when I was 19. It was a pretty traumatic experience for me where I was called to the college where I was attending for a kid my age, a man my age, who his roommate called because he was having stomach pain and acting funny. And, when a healthy 20-year-old guy calls about stomach pain and calls the ambulance, there's a good chance something's really off. And when we got there, he was white as a ghost, freezing cold. He had no blood in his system anymore. And he had a disease called Wilson's disease, where copper builds up on the arteries. And in this case, an artery was occluded, his hepatic artery was occluded and exploded. And so all the blood came out of the system into his belly. It was all sitting to a very distended belly, filled with all of his blood and no blood circulating anyplace else. I watched him take his last breath and say his last couple of words, and we could not save him. And I remember in the ambulance, they were trying all sorts of things to get IVs in his bigger veins in his legs and in his neck, and it wasn't happening. And because there was just no blood in there, to like the vein, once you get the needle in, it just pops right out the other side because there's nothing in between. And the driver just made a quick, kind of startling turn, and I remember hitting my head on the little part of the ambulance that kind of hangs down with cabinets in it. I just hit my head on there, and it was very intensely painful. But I was so focused on what we were doing, it just wasn't a thought at the time. I remember being sore there afterwards for a couple of days. Flash forward several years, I was in massage school, and we're working on all these little muscles of the body. And at that time, we were starting to focus on the face and the head. And when my massage partner, my fellow classmates, started to push into this muscle by my eyebrow, I could all of a sudden just be right there in that ambulance. I can smell the smells. I can hear the sounds. I can feel my heart racing as we're trying to save this guy. And it's so vivid and so clear. And I can still, now that it's been found, I can still sometimes point on there. But that's where I hold that traumatic experience, And you sometimes will just be massaging and we'll find it. We'll find something that you're holding on to. You may know what it is. You may not know what it is. You may know and not be ready to share what it is. But you have this big release where it starts to come out, either as tears or other things. And so that's one of the things we can do is kind of help remove things that you're holding on to that are your body's reacting to as if you're still in that dangerous situation or that heightened situation. In the abdomen, we can do massage work that increases blood flow to the womb, to try to ensure a healthy, thick lining so that if there's a fertilization, it has what to sustain it until the placenta grows. Reduce tension between the ovaries and the uterus, like calming down spasm that could be happening around the fallopian tubes. And a lot of central nervous system relaxation. So several of the modalities like craniosacral therapy, gentle jaw work, hand and foot reflexology, things that help calm that central nervous system and bring it back to a more feed and breed type of operation and away from the fight or flight mode.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that about that young man that you were with there, because that is, and that, yeah, and interesting but it was stored in the same spot and it came out there with a release. What are you, as far as the massage? I personally love massage. I've always loved massage. Is it anything particular, like more of a deeper massage or any kind, or just like if you were to do a regular massage, like what? Obviously, the abdominal one would be, more for reproductive health and other things. But from massage, like what are you looking for in a practitioner if someone's looking for one?
Right. So massage is sort of a vast, modality. There's a lot in there, and I carry a tool belt of massage techniques that are I can interchange depending on what we're doing. So, like between day 3 and day 10 of a cycle, that's when we do more of the abdominal work, and it's not very deep. We're not trying to release like those deep core or abdominal muscles. This is about gently bringing more blood flow and decreasing tension. Other times it's somebody who's more of an energy worker with massage. So then we're more likely to find where you're holding onto those pockets of trauma that are in the muscles or in the organs. Deep tissue is helpful, especially for, if you're struggling with those postural aches and pains, because it's a cycle. There's a spasm pain cycle, for example. So when you feel pain, your muscles go into spasm to sort of guard and protect, but that can create even more pain, and then you spasm up even more. So if we can break that cycle, because when you're in that cycle, that's triggering to your nervous system that you're in danger. Cortisol, the wrong hormones for helping you get pregnant. So the deep tissue has a role there. And then the other massage modalities that I would include in massage are the people who specialize in either reflexology, so working on the hands, the feet, the ear. You have a whole map of the body, like from right after the egg fertilizes and starts to become rod shaped, as the cells just reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. There's a time where the outer ball of cells, which are going to become all of your skin and superficial tissue, are in touch with all of the inner cells, which are going to become your organs. And in reflexology, the idea is that they maintain a connection. So even though it turns into a rod first, from a ball to a rod, and the ends of that rod are going to become the hands and the feet. And so for a moment in time, there is a contact between every part on one side of the hands and the other side, the feet, and the rest of the organs in the body. And then it keeps growing, 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 growing. But there's still a map on the hand and on the foot of where it connects to different organs and different functions in your body. It's not a connection you can't cut somebody open and see. It's not a direct nerve connection. There's some sort of connection from when they used to be directly in contact. And you can affect, if I have somebody who's got a lifelong drinking problem and their liver suffers, you can feel it in the point on the foot that correlates to that. And you can feel it, so you can see something's happening in that region, but you can also have a positive impact by working it through. And that's true of all the different functions of the body. So you can do that type of body work on the hands and feet for calming the nervous system, but also helping to boost the reproductive function that way. So those are some of the massage modalities that we kind of use interchangeably, either during a session or during a cycle, depending on what kind of goal we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I personally like reflexology. Sometimes when they start doing it, you're like, really, this is nothing. And then at the end of it, it's like complete bliss and zen, just like walking out of there in a bit of a, yeah, just zen like. That's just describe it. Same with same when I do acupuncture too, or you're just.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a map of the whole body on the foot and you thoroughly massage through that map, even though you haven't touched most of the body, you've still created a relaxation effect throughout.
And then the craniosacral piece, which I've had a few times. Can you just say why that would be helpful for someone?
Yeah, craniosacral is a modality that I would say is part energetic and part structural. So on the structural side, you have the brain and spinal cord that are nurtured and nourished by cerebrospinal fluid that flows around a sac and picks up waste and brings in nutrients to the nerve tissue. However, unlike the blood in the body, there's no central pump moving that fluid around. It moves around with your natural movements. And so sometimes there's a blockage of the cerebrospinal fluid where it can't get into the nerve tissue. And when that happens, so you have toxicity buildup around that nerve tissue because it can't get out the garbage. and you have a lack of resources because it can't bring in the nutrition. And this is very powerful in babies who have these types of blockages, and you see the central nervous system irritation in the babies. They are very fussy. They cry excessively. They don't sleep well. As soon as you put them to sleep, they wake up, and they're not happy about being up. Sometimes they have irritable digestion when they eat. They either have a lot of pain or they start to vomit. And then you do the craniosacral work on them, and there's not a lot of resistance because they don't have built up tension from years and years. And the results, even though it's so gentle, the results are so powerful. So you could see it really dramatically when we work on babies with craniosacral therapy, but even in adults, when you come in and we get that central nervous system nourished and we can take out the garbage, the whole central nervous system becomes much more relaxed. And it's happening both on a structural way with that cerebrospinal fluid, but also energetically, the energy starts to balance. And so even though it's super gentle, when I get craniosacral therapy, I usually within the first 10 minutes fall into a very deep sleep. And if I'm doing a 60 or 90-minute session, when I wake up, I feel like I've slept for 3 or 4 days. And it's very restorative.
I put the Ayurvedic one where they put the oil over your head too. Felt like I was drowning, but after I relaxed into that,
Oil boarding.
Yeah, it really was. I'm like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. And then it was relaxing. And and then another session at the same place, they did the craniosacral. So um, okay. So for people that the massage piece, the deep tissue, would you so deep tissue, the abdominal piece, anything else for the massage then?
Lymphatic.
Okay, the lymphatic. Okay, okay. And then what
Lymphatic
about,
massage.
and then what from a chiropractic standpoint, what would someone look at it there?
So in our office, we kind of combine the two together. But the idea with the chiropractic regarding this is that between every two vertebrae, you have nerve roots come out, and those nerve roots go and serve a part of the body. And we know which nerve roots go to which organs, both outgoing and incoming, bringing information out, bringing information in. And when the vertebrae are moving well, they generally protect. They have like this difficult dual function where they need to protect the nerve structures, the spinal cord itself, and all the roots coming out of it, and nerves coming out of it. But they also need to give you movement. You have to be able to move. If we were just looking at one function, which is protecting the brain and spinal cord, your skull and spine would just be solid bone, but you wouldn't be able to move at all. And if we were looking at just making you the best dancer ever, you'd have like a lot more movement, but you're be exposed a lot more. So it's sort of a compromise to be able to give you a lot of protection of those nerve structures and still very good movement. And sometimes it's not a perfect system. So sometimes things will start to get stuck instead of having movement between every vertebra and the one above it and below it in all the planes that it should be moving. You'll start to have restriction, and you'll have two vertebrae now moving like one with no movement between them. The two that are kind of stuck together or at least restricted in their movement. And when that happens, swelling builds up and can put pressure on the nerve. Pressure itself builds up and can start to squeeze on the disc or the nerve structures. And so what chiropractors do, and there's a lot of different ways to do it, but what we all have in common is we're looking through the body for those restricted joints where two bones come together and trying to restore motion between the joints around the joint between the bones. And there's a lot of different ways to find the restrictions. There's a lot of different ways to release the restrictions. So if you go to a bunch of different chiropractors, you might have different experiences, but the one thing that we're all chasing is those subluxations, those areas where bones come together and don't move very well. And, out in the extremities, it might be more pain oriented, in your wrists and elbow and shoulder, but along the spine, it has much bigger value there because restoring motion could improve nerve conduction, improve nerve function. And depending on what those nerves are doing, it could have a very positive impact on the body.
Excellent. So yeah, consider this in your toolkit, be it the massage, or the chiropractor, the reflexology, all of these, and obviously not all at once, but yeah, how often would you say someone on the fertility journey like I'm going to book my massage after this because it's been a little while. So I'm going back in. Um, how often, I guess to me, like I would think you're picking one that, feels right for you. If it's painful and you don't like it. I know some massages, I'm like, stop ripping my arm off. I'm like, I'm here for a
Hmm.
light to medium touch. But if you're there for abdominal piece, but like what are you, what's the frequency? What are you seeing?
It's a good question. It's hard to answer because it really depends. On our first visit, I use massage and chiropractic both as diagnostic tools and therapeutic tools. So when I do a massage, I can really get intel. I can really find out where the troublemakers are in the soft tissue, especially the muscles and the tendons. And I could see, is there a lot of tension and restriction, or are things moving pretty well? And if there is restriction and tension, I start to work on it therapeutically and also gauge, does this melt like butter? Does this body just want to release easily? Or is it going to take a lot of work to get a release? So depending on the goals and depending on what we find, the frequency will change from person to person. I rarely ever see people more than once a week, but I sometimes see people as infrequently as 4 times a year. So it's a big range. And again, it just really depends on what we know. Every case is so different. What we know and what your goals are and what we can learn. And it's a little bit of playing chess with the body too. I'll make a move and see how the body responds, and that will help guide my next move.
And is there anything that you're personally obsessed right now with, be it a resource, a app, a website, a documentary? We'll link to your informed pregnancy TV here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anything that you're obsessed with right now and wanted to share with the listeners?
In the fertility space, I don't have anything that I'm super obsessed with at the moment, but that is probably because we do mostly pregnancy and postpartum. And what I could say, there's a lot of great things in the pregnancy and postpartum space that I'm obsessed with. I think perhaps one of the resources for fertility that I've become very excited about is a nutrition program called This Is Needed or needed.com. This is needed.com. It's two women who I know personally who, as a business school project, started to put together a company. And the idea for both of them was they both were taking a lot of supplementation, but were not feeling good. And when they started to research how the supplements work, what goes into them, and what quantities and what form, bioavailability of the form of that nutrient in that supplement, they realized that there's a lot of data that we have now that we didn't have when most of these formulations were made. And we can do better. And so they kind of looked at reimagining women's health supplementation. And they started with a prenatal multivitamin, and they've just exploded. Every single product that they make has a reason why they made it that way, or multiple reasons why they made it that way. And they just came out with a great egg quality supplement. But even their men's hormone, their men's supplements, their omegas and their um, probiotics and their multi are meant for boosting the natural fertility that you have on both sides. And so they have all these bundled packages of things that you can get for both partners when you're trying to conceive. And I'm excited about it for a lot of different reasons. But one of them is I started taking they only had women's supplements at the beginning, and I started taking their probiotic and maybe 2 years ago. And I had a horrible case of COVID when it first came out in March of 2020. And I used to get whatever the kids had when they brought it home. But since I've been taking their prenatal probiotic, I feel I'm exposed to everybody because I'm in the office every day, and a lot of my patients have little kids, and they're exposed to everything they get. I don't get sick. I rarely get sick, and I've been now recommending their products for fertility and pregnancy for a long time, and the feedback has been really, really good. So that's something I could definitely sink my teeth into by way of, pre-birth excitement.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard about them. Okay, so if you could share about Informed Pregnancy TV, what would the listeners learn there?
So, my my background is medical. I ended up in a more holistic space, and I think there's benefit to both. But this goes back to what you said at the beginning. If you don't study and research what options are available, you're never going to be able to be in the driver's seat when it comes time to making decisions. And that leaves a long amount of possible regret in the background in the past when you look back and saying, I wish I knew about that choice, or I wish I knew about that choice. And so we put together the Informed Pregnancy Project, which as a bullseye is very focused on birth, but the target around it on the pre side is not just birth, but pregnancy and fertility. And on the post side is not just birth, but also postpartum and parenting. So all of our resources are growing from the middle out. And we don't have great fertility resources yet, but we are in development of bringing on fertility resources. So that's our podcast, which is in its 10th year now. We have 350 episodes and just a lot of everything on there on how to get ready for a pregnancy, how to get ready for a birth, and how to get ready for parenthood. Our blog, the Informed Pregnancy blog, and then also the newest thing is informedpregnancy.tv or Informed Pregnancy Plus, where we put together all the streaming content, documentaries, and some of the ones that come up on the fertility journey are miscarriage, and it's a difficult topic, and we are always on the search for, content, video content that will help people and support people during their fertility journeys, during their miscarriage journeys, and not be alone. There's a docu-series that we have on there called "You're Not Alone." Another one that we're just putting up now called "Stillbirth," or I'm sorry, it's called "Still Loved," and it's about stillbirth. And just a lot of mind body on there. We've been talking about that a little bit. So meditations, yoga, exercise routines that you can do. It's especially, I think, important for people who live in towns where you don't have a ton of these resources around you, or where it's just so expensive to be able to do them, in person. So Informed Pregnancy Plus, informedpregnancy.tv, is a subscription service. Anybody can try it for free, but then it's around $7 a month for access to everything that we have. And like I said, it's only a couple of months old. It's growing rapidly every day. And the bulk of the content on there is around birth right now, but we are gradually adding stuff for fertility and pregnancy as well.
Excellent. So we'll have that link in the show notes. Any final thoughts for us?
No, I just really, I really appreciate you. I mean, as a person who was on that fertility roller coaster and who was told that we would not have biological children, and thankfully, we're able to find a way to overcome it. But I think until you're on that roller coaster, you can never really understand it. And as the partner, I don't know that I can understand it, even having gone through it with my wife, how it was like to be in her shoes on that journey, just so different. And the resources and the community we found so helpful. And so I'm grateful to you, Sarah, for all of the information and the work that you're doing to support your audience.
Thank you, and all the work that you're doing as well. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.